During our third year of university, I crossed paths with Cindy. She was studying education and business administration while I was pursuing an engineering degree, hoping to be the first in my family to graduate from college. Her dream was to follow in her parents' footsteps in the field of education, inspired by them, and she believed in learning something new every day. This philosophy resonated with me, as my parents, who ran a small farm, also emphasized the importance of learning and being self-sufficient. To finance my studies, I worked at a local tutoring service, reducing my need for student loans. Midway through the semester, our professor assigned us to groups. Initially, I was nervous about the project, but my attitude changed when Cindy was assigned to my group in political science class. We had to analyze a famous Supreme Court case given by the professor, explain it, discuss the decision, and argue whether it was a good ruling. We were assigned Marbury v. Madison, the first major Supreme Court case that had significant effects. The ruling limited the power of the Supreme Court to prevent it from becoming more influential than the other branches of government, and this decision shaped the Supreme Court as we know it today. We got along so well that we began dating and soon became exclusive. I hadn't dated much before due to a lack of money, but Cindy didn't care. She enjoyed simple activities like watching TV with me or going for walks. Picnics and museum visits were great dates for us. I fell deeply in love with Cindy, and she seemed equally in love with me. We got married right after graduation. During the first 5 years of our marriage, life was mostly wonderful. Our intimate life was fulfilling, and our new little house was perfect for us. As we lived in a new neighborhood, we quickly made many friends and had a vibrant social life. Cindy began working as an 8th grade teacher at a high school in northern Palm Beach County, and I landed a job at a large engineering firm in South Florida. However, over time, I realized I didn't enjoy engineering. As a junior engineer, I was stuck with all the boring tasks. To escape the monotony at work, I decided to pursue a master's degree, hoping it would lead to a raise and more interesting projects. Instead, I only received a $500 bonus. Disappointed, I thought, forget them, and decided to pursue a PhD. Despite my job being dull, things were generally going well, Cindy's career was flourishing, and we were deeply in love. Financially, we were comfortable and began discussing starting a family. But as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end. The first bad news came when my boss told me I was being moved from design work to inspections. Inspections were even more tedious than the design work I had been doing. The second piece of news, which seemed good at the time, was that Cindy would be moving to a new position as head of the guidance department at West Jupiter High School. This promotion would turn out to be a huge mistake. The third major problem in my life arose when Brock Turner was appointed principal at Cindy's school. Brock was a former NFL player who had played for 5 seasons with 3 different teams. He had been drafted by Dallas in the 3rd round as an inside linebacker but was traded after 2 seasons despite performing well. He spent 2 years in Seattle before being traded to Philadelphia, where he had another good season but ended his career after a serious ankle injury in a playoff game. After realizing his football career was over, Brock tried working in television due to his natural charisma, but it didn't work out. His charm came across as arrogance on screen, which led to him being fired. He then worked at a regional bank in customer service but quit after 9 months because he didn't like office work. Eventually, Brock became a gym teacher and football coach at a suburban high school in Philadelphia. In 3 years, he was promoted to assistant principal and head football coach. Although his team never had postseason success, when the principal at Cindy's school retired, Brock applied for the position and got it. During the first year, I talked more about Brock than Cindy did. I was impressed because he was a former NFL player, but my opinion changed when I met him. I found him self-absorbed and arrogant. In contrast, his wife, April, was charming, intelligent, and a bit shy. She was also stunning, like a smaller, more beautiful version of Whitney Houston. I couldn't understand why she was with Brock, but most of the school staff, including Cindy, was fascinated by him. I tried to hint to Cindy that her boss was a womanizer, but she just laughed and said I was jealous. I decided to be honest. Yes, I admit I'm a little jealous. He's taller and in better shape than me, plus he was a professional football player. Cindy hugged me and said, "You don't need to be jealous. He's only an inch taller, and you're in great shape too. And so what if he played football? I chose you." Her reassurance calmed me, and we moved on. Even though I felt uncomfortable around Brock, Cindy kept bringing me to all the school events, where we always ended up sitting with Brock and his wife, April. Occasionally, I chatted with April at these events and found out they had been married for 3 years and had a little daughter named Tiffany. One night, at the school district's Christmas party, I saw what Brock was really like. If Cindy thought I was jealous, it was nothing compared to how Brock treated April at the party. Brock asked Cindy to dance without even consulting me. At first, I thought it was rude, and it bothered me that Cindy didn't make sure I was okay with it. I watched for a while and saw that Brock was keeping Cindy at a respectful distance. I approached April and we had a great conversation. I learned that she was an adjunct professor at a local community college that had recently become a 4-year university. She taught French and German. Her mother's family had moved from the Congo to France, and her father was German. Before April was born, her parents had moved to the United States. Since the university had only recently become a 4-year institution, they were still filling teaching positions. April was hoping that her part-time job would eventually turn into a full-time position as an associate professor. During our chat, she showed me pictures of her daughter, who looked like a smaller version of April. I laughed as April recounted several adorable things Tiffany had done. When the third song ended, Brock and Cindy returned to the table. Brock seemed irritated to see me talking to his wife. "You're sitting in my seat," he said sharply. His tone surprised me, but I apologized and moved. Then I offered to get drinks for everyone. April asked for another glass of Chardonnay, and Cindy wanted a Coke. When I returned, Brock grabbed me by the arm, took the wine glass from me, and threatened, "Stay away from my wife, or I'll knock you out." "What's your problem?" I asked, surprised by his aggressiveness. "Just stay away from my wife," he replied as he walked away. Shortly afterward, Brock announced that he and April were leaving. Their sudden departure was surprising, and Cindy's look also caught me off guard. On the way home, Cindy confronted me. "What did you do to upset Brock?" "I didn't do anything," I replied. "You must have done something because he was really angry with you," Cindy insisted. "He threatened to hit me if I didn't stay away from his wife." "I was just being polite while you danced without even checking with me if it was okay." "What does that mean?" Cindy demanded. "Never mind," I said, frustrated. "I don't want to talk about Brock anymore." After the Christmas party, my feelings toward Brock changed from discomfort to clear dislike. However, I didn't want to cause any trouble since he was Cindy's boss. Fortunately, after that holiday event, Cindy rarely mentioned Brock. A few months into the new year, the economy suffered a severe recession that hit the real estate markets hard. Initially, my company wasn't affected because we had a lot of ongoing work, but as time passed and no new projects came in, people began to get anxious. I kept my head down and worked diligently, but I knew that if the economy didn't improve, layoffs might be around the corner. One day, Cindy came home excited because she had been chosen to organize a career guidance assembly at her school. I didn't understand why she was so excited, as I thought the students would only be interested in getting out of class for a few periods. However, I supported her enthusiasm. If I had known that she was so thrilled because Brock had chosen her for the task, I might have been less enthusiastic about helping. Fortunately, I'm glad I did help. Cindy had already recruited an accountant, a lawyer, a nurse, a programmer, and several other professionals to speak. She asked if I could arrange for an engineer from my company to give a brief talk. I asked my boss the next day, and he approved it, on the condition that I take a personal day since it was for Cindy. I agreed. The Career Guidance Assembly was planned to last 2 hours, with 12 professionals each speaking for 10 minutes. However, on the day of the assembly, 4 of the speakers cancelled or didn't show up. Cindy was frantic and almost in tears. I calmed her down, telling her not to worry, and offered to cover for the missing accountant, lawyer, automotive mechanic, and doctor. When it was my turn to speak, I kissed Cindy and told her not to worry as I walked up the steps to the stage. I noticed a group of high school students looking extremely bored. The only reason they hadn't left yet was because they would have to return to class. While preparing my slides, I started my presentation. Good afternoon, everyone. If you're asleep, please raise your hand. Naturally, almost all the hands went up, and the students laughed. Now I had their attention. I hope you find my talk interesting, and if not, at least it will keep you out of class a little longer. The students cheered. Taking a deep breath, I began. I'm an engineer, but today I'll be talking about several different professions. I'll also give you some solid advice on how to succeed in whatever you do, including how to get through high school with less stress. Many students laughed, but they sat up straighter. I was really getting into the rhythm of the presentation. I started with a joke about engineers. You might think engineers are just a bunch of nerds, but that's not true. Let me tell you a story to show you how practical engineers can be. I continued. One day, an engineering student was riding a shiny new bike across campus. He ran into another engineer who said, "Wow, that's a great bike. Where did you get it?" The first student replied, "You won't believe it. A girl came up to me, took off all her clothes, and said I could have whatever I wanted." The other engineer said, "That's fantastic. Good choice. Her clothes probably wouldn't have fit you anyway." The joke got a big laugh from the crowd. I moved on to a slideshow that showed various buildings and structures. One slide featured a carpet museum with a roof that looked like a rolled-up carpet. Another slide showed the crooked house, which appeared to lean in different directions. I also showed a building designed to look like a giant picnic basket. I ended the slideshow with a seemingly ordinary 9-story building and asked if anyone could guess what was special about it. After several attempts, I revealed, "You'll never guess. This is the largest brothel in Europe, located in Germany." The boys cheered while the girls reacted with disgust. I quickly changed the topic to discuss different professions, covering the average salaries and the education required for each job. I included more jokes and gave advice on how to study and take exams, sharing my belief that to succeed in anything, you should always strive to do better than you think you can. It may seem counterintuitive, but I explained that if you don't push yourself to improve, you won't make progress. I also emphasized that there is no such thing as a dumb question, and asking for help is smart, unlike those who don't seek help. Finally, I talked about people who choose not to go to college but instead work in trades. I encouraged those interested in this option, explaining that they could earn more than many college graduates. I was having such a great time that I didn't realize I had gone over my allotted time until Cindy signaled me to wrap it up. After acknowledging her, I finished my talk with one last piece of advice. At some point, everyone will have to give a public speech. It's one of the biggest fears people have, sometimes even more than death. Most of you will face this challenge eventually. When that happens, remember to stand tall so everyone can see you, speak clearly so everyone can hear you, and keep your speech brief so people will appreciate it. "Thank you, you've been wonderful," I said, receiving a standing ovation, a kiss from Cindy, and a handshake from Brock. But that wasn't the end of it. Unbeknownst to me, 3 other high school principals were there, and they asked me to speak at their schools. I mentioned that I had taken a personal day to give the talk for Cindy, but eventually, Cindy persuaded me to give the talks at the other schools as well. The 3 talks went very well. At the last one, in a high school in a poorer area, the principal said he wished I could be one of their teachers. I was feeling on top of the world, but soon things took a turn for the worse. One Monday morning, I was called into my boss's office and told I was being laid off. The severance package was reasonable, including 3 months of salary and medical insurance coverage. When I got home and told Cindy about the layoff, her first reaction was, "Oh great, how are we going to pay the mortgage now?" I just looked at her and said, "Thanks for the support," then grabbed a beer from the fridge and went to our study, which we used as an office. I turned on the computer and started looking for jobs. A few minutes later, Cindy came in quietly and apologized, saying she was just worried about losing the house. I kissed her and hugged her. "Don't worry, the company gave me 3 months of severance. I'm sure I'll find something before the time runs out." However, as the severance money began to run out and I still hadn't found a job, Cindy's pressure on me to find work increased every day. The tension in our house grew as I faced rejection after rejection. I began to feel like a failure. Then something happened that made me feel even worse. Alan Ladd, the assistant principal at West Jupiter High School, left for a new job in California. Brock quickly promoted Cindy to take his place. From then on, I had to listen to how much everyone loved Mr. Turner, how great they thought he was, and how he was being considered for the deputy superintendent position. My dislike for Brock Turner reached new levels, especially as I remained unemployed for the 4th month. I felt like Cindy was losing respect for me. Then, an unexpected opportunity arose. On the evening news, there was a report about a new program designed to attract teachers to schools in low-income areas. The program was considering life experience instead of a teaching certificate, but if you were hired, you would need to obtain a certificate within 2 years. The starting salary was $3,000 higher than the usual starting salary for a first-year teacher. Since I hadn't found a job in my field, I decided to apply. I sent my resume to the school board the next morning, and by the afternoon, I already had an interview scheduled for the next day. I didn't tell Cindy because I didn't want to raise her expectations. The interview ended with a job offer. I didn't realize it at the time, but as soon as my resume appeared on the Human Resources computer screen, they did a quick search of my name and found a video of one of my career talks, which sped up my hiring process. They offered me a position at Riviera High School, the worst-performing school in the county, located in Riviera Beach. Despite its fancy name, the area had been in decline for years. Riviera High School had the worst test scores of all the high schools in the county, with only 6% of students being college-ready upon graduation. Nevertheless, I accepted the job to teach math and science. When Cindy came home that night, I excitedly shared the news of my new job, expecting her to be happy and supportive. Instead, she looked horrified and said she didn't want me to take the job because it was too dangerous. She told me some of the terrible things that happened at the school, like metal detectors at all the entrances and security guards patrolling the hallways. Last year, 3 teachers were attacked, and 1 had been hospitalized. Cindy also reminded me that I had no teaching experience and didn't think I would last a week. After talking to several people and hearing even more alarming stories, I was very nervous on my first day. The appearance of the school didn't help. The building was old and poorly maintained. There was graffiti on the front of the school and even more inside. Students ran through the halls as if they owned the place, and there were guards stationed everywhere, even outside the bathrooms. I had many ideas for my lessons, but I decided to wait and observe the environment first. Instead of diving into my lesson plans, I used math and science games. These games were fun and simple, and without the students knowing it, they were actually learning some of the material they needed for the final exams. The new principal of the school, Ben Carlson, was very strict. Being a tall, 240-pound black man who didn't tolerate any nonsense made him an excellent choice for the job. The students quickly learned that crossing him was a bad idea. He firmly believed in strict discipline, which I supported. I especially liked his approach of removing all gang members from regular classes and placing them in a separate class with rotating teachers and 3 security guards. Any gang member who misbehaved received a warning and was then expelled. By the third week, the most problematic gang members had either been expelled or left on their own. It might sound harsh, but some students are beyond help. My wife underestimated my ability to keep the job. Not only did I make it through the first week, but by December, I was thriving. I revamped my lesson plans to include a new set of games, and the students responded very well. Other teachers started using some of my ideas, and they seemed to be working. By the end of the year, Riviera High School had improved from rank 58 to 51 in academic performance, and I was nominated for Teacher of the Year. Although I didn't win, being nominated was an honor. It frustrated me a bit that Cindy didn't seem impressed with my work. She kept asking when I would stop wasting time and go back to engineering. Eventually, I told her I wouldn't return to engineering because I loved teaching. She wasn't excited about my choice, but she seemed to accept it. During the Christmas holidays, I finally decided to pursue the PhD I had put off because of the economic recession. I wasn't particularly interested in mechanical engineering, but I was in computers, so I opted for a PhD in computer engineering. I knew from my last conversation with April, nearly a year ago, that she was working on her PhD in comparative studies at Florida Atlantic University, FAU. I researched FAU's PhD programs and decided to enroll there for my doctorate in computer engineering. I spent another year working at Riviera Beach High School, where our academic rankings improved from 51st to 46th. During that time, the school board promoted Cindy to assistant principal at West Jupiter High School. But everything changed that summer. Just as our lives were moving forward, I received some good news. Brock had been promoted to deputy superintendent, and Cindy was nominated to become the new principal of West Jupiter High School. Although I still didn't trust Brock, I felt relieved that his new role meant he would work at the district headquarters, and Cindy wouldn't see him every day. However, she still had to visit the headquarters once a week. Initially, I wasn't happy about this, but I learned it was typical for new principals. I continued taking classes at FAU, which was about a 40-minute drive away. Since April was also working on her PhD there, I suggested we carpool. April liked the idea, but when she mentioned it to Brock, he became furious. He called me immediately and threatened to hit me. I expected he wouldn't approve of the carpool idea, but I didn't anticipate such extreme hostility. I was disappointed because I enjoyed talking to April, and carpooling would have made the commute more pleasant. Despite this, April and I often met for coffee during class breaks. Sometimes others joined us, but more often, it was just the two of us. At first, we talked about superficial things, but over time, we discussed a wide range of topics. Despite Brock's jealousy, April and I became good friends. She even suggested I apply for a job at the new four-year university. I appreciated the suggestion but explained that I was being considered for the head of counseling position at a new high school. During our coffee chats, I learned some details about April and Brock. I found out that April had graduated with honors from Stanford before moving back to her parents' house in Philadelphia. She met Brock at a charity event and didn't like him at first, but Brock was persistent, and eventually, they started dating. It didn't take long before April fell deeply in love with him. From the way Brock kept other men away from April, it was clear he was completely devoted to her. About a year after their marriage, they had Tiffany. April mentioned that Brock didn't spend much time with their daughter and had little patience for her. He had been hoping for a son. "You must be joking," I laughed. "Tiffany is such a sweet girl. If Cindy and I have a daughter, I hope she's like Tiffany." "Thank you," April said, giving me a kiss on the cheek. One night during class, our professor started feeling unwell and had to leave. I could have gone home about 20 minutes earlier, but I decided to stay and have coffee with April. I was already in the cafeteria when April arrived with a few of her classmates. I raised the cup of coffee I had bought for her, and she walked over to where I was sitting while her classmates went to get their own drinks. "You didn't have to do that," she said with a smile. "It was no problem," I smiled back. I've been here for about 15 minutes and knew your class would be on break soon, so it wasn't a big deal. Did your class end early? April asked as she sipped her coffee. Yes, the professor got sick, I replied. April was quiet for a moment before saying softly, I envy you. I should be further along in my studies, but Brock hasn't made it easy. Now he's pressuring me to have a boy, but if I do that, it will delay my PhD for years and ruin my chances of becoming an associate professor. So, I told him I wouldn't consider having another child until I finish my PhD. He wasn't happy with that. April pulled her cell phone out of her bag and said quietly, damn it. Is something wrong? I asked. I need to let Brock know I'll be staying late for a meeting with my advisor, but my phone's dead. Can I use yours? Sure, but do you think that's a good idea? April thought about it for a moment and then agreed. You're right, there's no point in making things worse. Can I use your phone for just a minute? April quickly dialed Brock's number, and I heard her mutter, damn it, again. Another problem? I asked. Yes, April answered with frustration. I told Brock 2 days ago that his voicemail was full, and he still hasn't emptied it. Can you do me a favor, Todd? Of course, what do you need? I asked. April rummaged through her bag, found a piece of paper and an envelope, and wrote a quick note, sealing it in the envelope. Can you drop this off at my house on your way home? Brock won't be bothered, just tell him I tried to contact him but his voicemail is still full, and I ran into you as you were leaving, so I asked you to deliver the note. I don't want him to come here because I'm running late. Although I wasn't thrilled about delivering the note, I agreed. I figured Brock wouldn't be too upset since I was just passing along a message from his wife. Still, I couldn't help but remember the saying about shooting the messenger, and I found myself laughing at the thought as I turned onto Turner Street. My discomfort turned into confusion when I saw my wife's car parked in Brock's driveway. I couldn't understand why Cindy would be at Brock's house at that hour of the night. I parked on the street, trying to figure out why she was there. I tried to think of a reasonable explanation, but nothing came to mind. Feeling a growing sense of unease, I decided to take a look around the house. The lights were on downstairs, and most of the blinds were up. I quietly moved to the side of the house. Since I had never been to Brock's house before, I didn't know what to expect. The first window I looked through was the living room, the second was the kitchen, and the third was the dining room. When I got to the back of the house, I noticed that the blinds in the fourth room were mostly down, however, 2 of them were partially raised, and 1 window was slightly open. What I saw next left me in shock. Brock was sitting in a chair, completely exposed, preparing for what was clearly an intimate moment. At that moment, Cindy entered the room. I quickly pulled out my phone and started recording. Cindy laughed and said, I can't believe how big it is. The first time I saw it, I didn't think it would work, but now it's all I think about. Brock grunted, come here and let me help you. Cindy moaned and added, I wish we didn't have to be cautious. I want us to be closer, so we can have a baby together. I felt sick, but what happened next was even worse. Brock said, let's go upstairs. We've got time for one more before April comes back, that witch. When can we be together all the time? Cindy asked. Soon, Brock replied. I just need to sort out my finances first. I don't want April to keep everything. Cindy laughed, and they both went upstairs. I hurried back to my car and drove to the nearest parking lot, where I broke down, crying. I couldn't believe Cindy had betrayed me like that. We had been talking about starting a family, and now she was hoping her lover would get her pregnant. After the initial shock wore off, my anger grew stronger than ever. It was clear that my marriage was over, and all I could think about was how much pain I could cause them both. I had the video, but I wasn't sure if it would hurt them much if they were really in love. I didn't know exactly how to get revenge, but my thoughts of retaliation soon shifted to thoughts of April. Brock had mentioned that he planned to leave his wife with almost nothing, so I needed to warn her. I drove back to FAU as fast as I could, overwhelmed by rage and tears. Though I got there quickly, I feared April might have already left. I was relieved to see her car still parked among the others. April came out about 10 minutes later, and I found her outside. She immediately noticed how upset I was and looked concerned. "Is something wrong?" she asked, clearly worried. "Did something happen with Brock or Tiffany?" I shook my head. "As far as I know, they're both fine physically, but I have some painful news for you. Your husband and my wife are having an affair." "That's not funny, Todd," April said sharply. "I know you don't like my husband, but I won't accept you making up stories about him. I wish it weren't true, and I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't seen it and recorded it." April dropped her backpack and purse, starting to tremble. I picked up her things and said, "We need to talk. It's going to be hard to see, but you need to know this is real and that I'm not making it up." I led her to the passenger seat of my car, played the video, and handed her my phone. April started crying uncontrollably even before the video finished. I took the phone back and knelt down to her level. "I know this is happening suddenly," I said sympathetically, "and you haven't had time to process it, but I've already decided to divorce Cindy. From what Brock said in the video, he's planning to hide his money before divorcing you." "I didn't catch that," April said, looking confused. So I replayed the video for her. After watching it a second time, April was no longer in shock, she was furious. "I had heard rumors about Brock before and during our marriage, but I didn't believe them. But if he thinks he can run off with your wife and leave me with nothing, he's in for a big surprise." April realized what she had said and quickly apologized. "I'm sorry for calling your wife that." "Don't worry, you're just speaking the truth," I replied. After making sure April was okay to drive home and sending her a copy of the video, I went home. When I arrived, Cindy was already asleep, or pretending to be. I didn't care which. I went to our study, turned on the computer, and started planning the end of my marriage. The next morning, after Cindy left around 8:30 a.m., I showered and got ready to handle our finances. Before leaving, I looked up a divorce attorney online and scheduled an appointment for the next day. Cindy and I didn't have many assets. Our house had little equity, so it would either be sold, or Cindy could buy out my share. We had joint checking, savings, and investment accounts totaling around $75,000. Cindy had a retirement account with the Florida retirement system, and I had a 401k until recently switching to the FRS. Our retirement accounts were more or less equal in amount. I thought dividing our assets would be straightforward, but I needed to wait until I spoke to the lawyer to understand my exact situation. I knew Florida was a no-fault divorce state, so the video wouldn't help in court, but it might make Cindy agree to the divorce. By 10 a.m., I had arranged everything I could, so I started looking for a small apartment. I found a room in Lake Park and rented it. Then I went home and began packing my things. Around 2 p.m., I realized my new apartment wouldn't be big enough, so I also rented a storage unit nearby. If Cindy noticed anything missing, she didn't mention it. I stayed in the study, preparing for a possible new job offer. I slept on the couch, and Cindy left before I woke up the next morning. The next day, I met with my divorce attorney, Alicia Smithson, a middle-aged, straightforward woman. After showing her the video and explaining what Cindy had been doing, she told me the video wouldn't help in the divorce. She also warned me not to post it online, as I could face legal consequences. That night, I waited for Cindy to come home so I could confront her. She arrived around 9 p.m. and walked right past me in the living room. "Cindy, we need to talk," I called out. "I'm tired and need to shower," Cindy said, heading toward the stairs. "I don't care if you have Brock's filth on you," I responded. "We need to talk now." Cindy stopped at the foot of the stairs, turned around, and asked, "What are you talking about?" "Come here, and I'll explain," I said, standing up. Cindy cautiously walked toward the living room. "I think you owe me an apology for the way you just spoke to me," she said. "I don't think so," I replied, opening my laptop and playing the video. The screen quickly showed Cindy getting on top of Brock. Cindy watched the video for a moment before closing the laptop. "Well, now that it's out in the open, I guess I don't need to hide it anymore," Cindy said without showing any remorse. I laughed. "Cindy, do you remember when you said people should learn something new every day?" "Yes, and what?" she responded brusquely. "Well, it seems like you didn't learn anything when I warned you Brock was a womanizer. Now he's turned you into his lover." "There's no need to be rude," Cindy said, angry. "I know this must be hard on your pride, but a better man has taken me from you. I hoped we could end things amicably." I laughed out loud. "Since you didn't want to face the truth, now you're on your own. I've already rented an apartment and moved some of my things there. I'll come back for the rest later. You can stay here until the divorce is finalized. After that, the house will be sold, or you can buy my share. The papers will be delivered to you at work on Friday." I moved into my small new place. Loving Cindy so much made it incredibly painful. During the first few days, I could barely get out of bed to use the bathroom or eat. Fortunately, it was summer, so I didn't have any obligations. I spent all my time thinking about how to get revenge on them, but nothing came to mind. By the third day, I forced myself to get up, shower, and go grocery shopping. When I got back, I turned on the small TV in my kitchenette. The channel was showing a celebrity gossip program that immediately caught my attention. Former NFL linebacker Brock Turner and his wife are divorcing after 3 years. It seems the rumors about Brock being unfaithful are true, as his wife, April, has filed for divorce, citing infidelity. Our reporter spoke with Mr. Turner earlier today. "Mr. Turner, is it true your wife caught you with another woman?" "Please," Brock said with a sad smile. "My wife and I are going through a tough time. We're working on a big misunderstanding, and we'd appreciate some privacy as we try to fix our marriage." I didn't feel much satisfaction from his response. I hadn't spoken to April since I told her about her husband's affair with my wife. It seemed incredibly unfair that Brock had ruined my marriage, and now he and April might be working things out. I was filled with rage and sadness again, but when my phone rang, fear was added to the mix. Before I could answer, the caller started talking. "Listen, idiot, I know it was you who took those pictures of me with your cheating wife. Just so you know, I'm living in your house, and I had a great time with her. You better watch the 6 o'clock news, because you're going to be in trouble." I was shocked that Brock had called me, but in the few seconds I had to think, I realized it wouldn't be hard for him to figure out that I was the one who recorded the video. Although I was scared, I wasn't going to let him know that. "Well, you're in luck, because Cindy is about to be my ex-wife," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "And if you're living there, I guess you haven't managed to fix that misunderstanding. Just watch the 6 o'clock news, idiot. You won't be so confident after that." Then he hung up. I was worried about what Brock might do, so I turned on the local news at 6. I didn't figure out what Brock's threat was about until about 10 minutes into the broadcast. The news anchor said, Palm Beach County Schools Superintendent SSH Crawford resigned today to accept a position with the Department of Education in Washington. Deputy Superintendent Brock Turner has been named interim superintendent. However, it is widely believed he will be offered the position permanently. A deep fear gripped me. Now I understood what Brock meant when he said my life was in trouble. Since he was the superintendent and I was just a teacher, he was my boss. Brock could make my job unbearable or even frame me for something to cover his tracks. I needed to get out from under his control. At first, I thought about quitting and returning to engineering, but the economy was just starting to recover, and I needed a stable income to support myself and pay my divorce attorney. Cindy's lawyer was making ridiculous demands. They wanted me to pay $50,000 for Cindy's share of the house, which had only about $2,000 in equity. Asking for $50,000 was absurd. Cindy also wanted me to withdraw the accusation of adultery and was accusing me of hiding money, demanding that I pay for a forensic accountant to investigate our finances. Even though her demands were irrational, I still needed to pay my attorney to represent me. Feeling anxious, I remembered that April had mentioned the university where she worked was looking for adjunct instructors. I quickly called the Human Resources Department to inquire. They told me to apply online. To make a long story short, after reviewing my credentials, I was hired to teach algebra, pre-calculus, and calculus. They gave me a one-year contract that paid about 80% of what I had been making as a high school teacher. I found that teaching at the college level was much more rewarding than teaching in high school. In high school, I was always trying to find new ways to keep the students interested, but in college, most of the students genuinely wanted to learn. And if I made the material interesting, they got excited about it. 2 weeks after starting the job, I ran into April in the cafeteria. She seemed as happy to see me as I was to see her. We had lunch together and caught up on our lives. April told me that Brock was struggling. He was supposed to be caring for their daughter, but he had convinced the judge that he wasn't fit for full custody. Even so, according to April, the divorce was dragging on. I explained that my own divorce had taken longer than expected, but it was finally nearing the end. I can't believe I fell for all of Brock's lies, April said, pushing aside her half-eaten sandwich. I heard the rumors, but Brock has a way of making everything he says sound so convincing. He must be a smooth talker because he managed to convince my wife to cheat on me, I said sadly. Cindy always used to say people should learn something new every day. That's a lesson I could have done without. I'm so sorry this happened to you, Todd, April said, taking my hand. You're one of the kindest people I've ever met. After that first lunch, April and I began eating lunch together almost every day, and we often met for coffee in the afternoon. This led to dinners and other outings. I was developing feelings for April, but I didn't want to risk ruining our friendship. Still, I wanted more, so when the circus came to town, I decided to invite her out. The circus is in town this weekend, I mentioned one day at lunch. I was planning to take Tiffany, but it might be a bit hard to manage, April said with a sigh. She's still confused about why her dad doesn't want to see her. He told me that if I go through with the divorce, he'll pay child support but won't be involved with Tiffany at all. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but Brock is a complete jerk, I said with a touch of anger. But then I smiled. Anyway, if you'd like to go to the circus, I'm sure between the two of us, we can handle a 4-year-old. The day at the circus was fantastic. Besides the circus, there was also a small fair going on. By the end of the day, April was holding one of my hands, and Tiffany was holding the other. Tiffany was also hugging a stuffed unicorn I had won for her. When we got to their house, I walked them to the door and tried to kiss April on the cheek, but she pulled me in and kissed me on the lips. I hugged and kissed her back. When we pulled apart, I felt Tiffany tugging on my pant leg. I want a kiss too, Tiffany said, raising her free arm toward me. I picked her up and kissed both of her cheeks. Thank you for coming with me and your mom, and for being such a good girl today. Tiffany smiled broadly at the compliment, and just as I was about to set her down, April asked, would you like to stay for dinner? It's nothing special, just Tiffany's favorite, pizza. I love pizza, I said, lifting Tiffany back onto my hip, and I'd love to have dinner with you two lovely ladies. Tiffany did a good job of keeping most of the tomato sauce on her face and hands. I laughed every time she slurped another strand of spaghetti. While April wiped Tiffany's face, I cleaned her hands. At one point, Tiffany grabbed my hand and placed it next to hers, then asked, why is my skin dark and yours isn't? I looked at April, who seemed amused, and then replied, because it makes you and your mom even more beautiful than me, silly. Tiffany laughed, boys aren't beautiful, they're handsome. Do you think you're handsome? Yes, and Mommy thinks so too, Tiffany said firmly. All right, young lady, that's enough, April quickly interrupted. It's bath time and then story time before bed. After her bath, Tiffany asked me to read her a story, and I gladly agreed. I ended up reading 2 stories, using different voices for all the characters. Tiffany loved it but didn't settle down until I gave her a goodnight kiss. Once Tiffany was asleep, April and I sat on the couch, sipping wine and chatting about teaching. Suddenly, April set down her glass, took mine, and placed it aside. Then, she leaned in and kissed me passionately. I was surprised that this beautiful woman was kissing me. I often thought to myself that she was one of the most remarkable women I had ever met. We need to take this to my bedroom, April whispered. Please be gentle, she added softly. Brock was so rough sometimes it hurt. After that night, April and I grew very close, but we decided not to live together until our divorces were finalized. My divorce was settled first, and I felt a huge sense of relief when the final court date arrived. I was in the courtroom when Cindy walked in with Brock. Cindy gave me a smug smile as she clung to Brock's arm, and he stared at me with disdain the entire time, especially after kissing her before sitting down. I had asked April not to attend because I suspected Brock would be there. The divorce proceedings were uneventful. The judge simply asked if both lawyers were satisfied, and when they said yes, he banged his gavel, and it was over. April's divorce took nearly 3 more months to finalize. During that time, April and I completed our PhDs. Shortly afterward, April got a job as an associate professor. I didn't get a professor position, but I was offered a 2-year teaching contract, which was unusual since the university had only offered 1-year contracts before. This was because my classes had become so popular that there was now a waiting list. I also agreed to teach an extra pre-calculus class due to the high demand. I was now earning about 25% more than I had as a high school teacher, and they promised me an associate professor position in the near future. Things were going better than expected, but we hit a bump in the road when I had to attend a 3-day seminar in Atlanta. The sessions ran all day, with only short breaks every hour, and there were group study sessions that often stretched late into the night. By the end of each day, I was exhausted and collapsed into bed, only to start again the next day. I had explained the schedule to April, so she understood, but Tiffany didn't understand where I had gone or why I hadn't called. When I finally returned, Tiffany practically jumped on me the moment I walked through the door. She was crying because I had been gone. I tried to explain where I had been, but she didn't calm down until I gave her a pink stuffed dragon. One of her favorite books was about rainbow dragons, and her favorite one was the pink dragon named Pinky. As soon as I gave her the dragon, she squealed with joy and covered my face with kisses. Once Tiffany calmed down, we sat down for dinner. Kids really do say the funniest things. Tiffany looked at me and asked, "Why don't you live here?" "I want you to be my daddy." "Well," I said, glancing at April, who was smiling, "I would love to be your daddy, but I'm not sure what your mom would think about that." Still smiling, April said, "Your mom would love for you to become Tiffany's daddy. But there's one condition, you'd have to be my husband first." "Really? You'd marry me?" I asked, surprised. "I thought you'd never ask," April replied with a giggle. We had a simple wedding with only a few friends, my father, and April's mother. My mother had passed away when I was 9, and April's father had died when she was 15. I was as happy as I could be. Even though Cindy had left me for a former NFL player, I felt like I had come out on top. Cindy might be with someone famous, but now I was married to the most beautiful woman I knew, and she came with a wonderful daughter I loved as if she were my own. During the divorce, Brock kept harassing April, showing how desperate he was to get her back. He alternated between begging and making subtle threats, but he never did anything that could get him in legal trouble. He was still living with Cindy, and from what I heard, she was very happy. I almost felt sorry for her, knowing that eventually, Brock would show his true colors. When Cindy betrayed me, I was devastated and furious. I was so focused on getting revenge on both of them that it consumed all my thoughts. But as I began building a relationship with April, my anger faded, and the desire for revenge disappeared. However, it seemed fate had its own plan for me to get my revenge anyway. Shortly after April and I got married, we decided to sell her house and buy a new one closer to the university. We decided to handle the sale ourselves and quickly found a buyer. However, since Brock's name was still on the deed, he needed to sign the sale contract. April called him, and at first, he was happy to hear from her, but his attitude quickly shifted from cheerful to unpleasant when she told him she wanted to sell the house to move closer to the university. He refused to sign, being his usual unpleasant self. April was prepared for this and reminded Brock that the divorce agreement required him to buy her out if he didn't want to sell. This made him furious, and he hung up. However, the next day, he called back and agreed to sign the contract at the closing. April asked Brock if he wanted anything from the house. He said he didn't want anything and that it was her problem to clean everything out. Cleaning the house was a huge job. We left the basement for last, and that's when we discovered something valuable. April brought up a box full of assorted items. At the bottom of the box was an old laptop that had belonged to Brock. April mentioned that he had bought a new laptop about a year and a half after becoming principal of West Jupiter School, so she thought he had discarded the old one. She asked if I could fix the laptop for Tiffany to use, and I told her I'd try, as long as it still worked. That night, after recharging the battery, I was surprised to discover that not only did the laptop work, but it also still had files on it. Originally, I planned to reformat the laptop, but then I decided to check the files first to see if there were any photos of Tiffany or April they might want to keep. What I found went far beyond simple mistakes. It revealed that Brock wasn't just an ordinary jerk, but one of the worst kind. Yes, there were some photos and videos of April and Tiffany, but most of the files were of naked women with Brock in intimate situations. Each video or photo had a description explaining the length of the relationship and the rating Brock gave each woman. While I didn't recognize most of the women, I did identify 5 of them. One was the wife of a Dallas Cowboys quarterback, a famous model. I remembered that shortly after their encounter, the couple divorced, and Brock was traded. Now I understood why. The other 4 women were teachers at West Jupiter School, 2 of them were married. Cindy was one of those married teachers. It was clear that Brock had been involved with all these teachers more or less at the same time. There were several photos and 2 videos of my ex-wife. The new videos were even more shocking than the one I had recorded. I couldn't believe how my once loving wife had become such a promiscuous person. But what Brock wrote about Cindy made me laugh. He praised her skills but complained that she was too clingy because she kept asking him to get her pregnant. He even considered having a child with her just to spite her husband. I was about to delete the files but then saw this as an opportunity for revenge. I copied all the explicit content onto a USB drive and continued exploring the laptop. What I found next made Brock seem like the biggest fool of all. He had left all his financial records on the computer. I couldn't believe it. Brock had left detailed financial statements with all his accounts, account numbers, and passwords. He had lied about his assets during the divorce. He had accounts in the Cayman Islands and in California that he hadn't disclosed in court. After going through the rest of the folders, I called April. First, I showed her the photos of the women Brock had been involved with, then I showed her the financial records. I wasn't sure what upset her more, the women or the hidden money. Ultimately, I think it was the women. She discovered that Brock had slept with her maid of honor, all her bridesmaids, and even her cousin. Things moved quickly after that. April took Brock back to court for hiding assets during their marriage. While he could have been jailed, the judge ended up awarding her 65% of the hidden assets. A good portion of this extra money went into a college fund for Tiffany, and another part was used as a down payment on a house just 2 blocks from the university. Since my divorce, I had been living in a small apartment with minimal expenses. With my savings and the money from my divorce, I was able to match April's down payment. I hadn't decided what to do with the list of Brock's top 10 lovers, but I kept the USB drive with me while I figured it out. I might have left it at that if it hadn't been for what happened at a university fair at the West Palm Beach Convention Center. I had been invited to speak at the fair, and April had taken the day off to accompany me. The fair had about 40 universities and colleges with booths set up, and high school students from nearby schools were coming to talk with the representatives. There were also seminars on creating a solid college application, choosing a career, and succeeding in college. While I was sitting with the university representative, I heard a voice I despised, Brock Turner. "Look, Cindy," Brock said with an arrogant smile, "it's your pathetic ex-husband." "That's funny, Brock," I said with a forced smile, "because that's exactly what your ex-wife says about you." "You're an idiot, Todd," Brock said, his face reddening. "I'm tempted to teach you a lesson about respecting your superiors." "Just ignore him, Brock," Cindy said, gripping his arm tightly. "He's not worth your time. Don't stoop to his level." Brock looked at Cindy and then at me with a malicious grin. He leaned in and kissed Cindy deeply, and she melted into the kiss. When they parted, Brock shot me a superior look as they turned to leave. I called out to Cindy, "Cindy, I found some pictures of you on the computer. I thought you might want to have them. You always said people should learn something new every day." She took the USB drive, muttering a barely audible, "Thanks." I hadn't realized that April had seen everything and had just approached me at that moment. She hugged me and gave me a quick kiss. "Sorry I left you alone for so long, dear," April said sweetly. "What the hell?" Brock exclaimed, visibly shocked. His face turned bright red when he noticed April's pregnant belly. "Oh, hi, Brock," she said with a charming smile. "Catching up with my husband." Brock took a step toward me but stopped when he saw a security guard nearby. He walked away with Cindy but kept glancing back several times, visibly unsettled. That night, April and I were in bed, and I was rubbing lotion on her belly. We were only half listening to the news when the anchor began reporting on a breaking story. Officers responded to a call at the residence of school superintendent Brock Turner related to an alleged domestic situation. We don't have many details yet, but Mr. Turner appears to have suffered a non-life-threatening injury. We know that he is currently in the hospital, and that Cindy Olver was taken to the county jail.